I read this summer and was totally jazzed about Stephen Brookfield's Becoming a Critically Reflective Teacher. And he uses critical theory, if that means anything to anybody. And he talks about how we can improve our teaching by relying on ourselves, our own experience, our colleagues, our students, and theory. So he talks about a lot of concepts going through these four lenses of ourselves, our colleagues, our students, and theory. And so that one is really fun. This is more practical. I was at the Teaching Professor Conference in June and picked up a couple books. This is called Designing a Motivational Syllabus. As you can see, I just read this. This one you can put some little yellow stickies. Creating engaging discussions, strategies for avoiding crickets in any size classroom and online. And this is my new agenda, which is hitting pause. I think in the classroom far too often we are pushing out all this information, and it's just what's going on in our society, right? In terms of our information society with Twitter and news all the time. So I think it's really important to help students and myself to hit pause occasionally, and this offers 65 lecture breaks for fresh and reinforced learning. So I have this week purchased most of these for the library at AU, so they'll be available in the library as well. For today, what we're doing is talking about our course policies. And the plan for the day is we're going to do introductions. We're a very big group, so we're going to try and do that quickly with just your name, your department or unit, and the number of years teaching in your career and at AU. I always, first day of class, I will give the question of introductions to the students in advance so that they can think about it before they have to give an answer, right? Because how many times have you said something because it was the first thing on your mind, and then afterwards you're like, I wish I had said something else. I sounded really stupid. All right. We're going to go through and I'll explain the learning outcomes. Why? Because this is my meta-analysis of this workshop to help you. Because at the end of this workshop, you're going to get an evaluation. And one of the questions is, were the learning outcomes clear? So I'm going to tell you what the learning outcomes are, so I can get a good mark on that one. So if you're new to teaching, I encourage you to look at what the student evaluations are. If you haven't, they are online. Someone can help you through CTRL so that you can see how you'll be evaluated at the end of the semester and to see whether you can then meet those expectations. I'm going to talk a bit more than I usually do in workshops, but it's my top 10 reflections on course policy, thinking about it. When I'm speaking, what I really want you to do is not so much think about the content, but just at the same time, don't send those around, that's okay. Because why?
We'll be distracted.
Right. Because, no, I appreciate that you want to see these, but think about it. In one of the teaching workshops I went to this summer at the Teaching Professor Conference, Stephen Chu was talking about how there's no such thing as multitasking. There is changing your task, but cognitively we can't do two things at the same time. So if you're doing one thing, you're not doing the other. And so it's very important. For example, I have a handout for you. I've not given it to you. Why? Because you'd be reading it, you wouldn't be listening to it. And so what I want to make sure is we're all on the same page. When I give you the handout, I will give you time to read it. Right? So I'm going to give you my top 10 reflections, and then I want to have time to either go into small groups on a specific policy. And the policies I'm most interested in are attendance, late assignments, technology in the classroom, and participation. And then perhaps also whether you allow revisions for papers or something. Or, depending on, this is all what the group wants. Or we'll do Q&A and comments as a whole group. Okay? So let's start. All right. So what are my goals for today? I want to help us think about and question our intentions about our course policy, right? And also how we can overcome those challenges. I also, and for example, I think it's important to be specific, but also be flexible, right? We need to be clear, but we also need to have some wiggle room for, for exceptional circumstances. I also want to help us develop specific policies. For example, on laptops, which is the one, how many of you struggle with laptops policy? Yeah, all right, that's my biggest. Late assignments, attendance, and participation. So by way of introduction, I've been thinking about this a lot. And part of it is because of my philosophy of education, which is all about fairness and democracy. And what I found was, and also that means preparing my students to be good citizens. And I realized that a lot of my policies were not doing that. That I was teaching them how to be good negotiators, how to lie, or adding to their anxiety and and I was also reinforcing power inequalities in the world, right? The student who's the first generation who isn't going to ask for an extension because they don't know that they can, or the student that's more privileged who's been asking for extensions forever because they are used to just asking, right? So I want to make sure that I'm not reinforcing power inequalities. So I know that, by way of intro, I know that policies vary from faculty member to faculty member. We're not going to, and I'm not encouraging that we have one policy for everything. But I just want, I talked to two colleagues in SIS, both beloved professors to their students. One has a policy, no penalty for late assignments. The other one has a policy, no late assignments accepted. That's really, is that a problem? Maybe. It's certainly confusing for our students. So what it means to me then is that we have to always be specific and clear to our students what are the rules, in other words, policies, what are the rules that we are asking our students to abide by in our classes. And, imagine the students, when I think about it, and I say this at the beginning of the semester, for the undergraduates, I know that you basically have 5 bosses. And you're trying to figure out, when you're taking 5 classes, so you have 5 bosses with 5 different sets of rules. That can be really confusing. What that means is I remember that when the students says to me, oh, you're gonna, there's a penalty for lateness. I don't remember that. And then I don't take that personally. What do you mean you didn't read my syllabus? No, it's because they're managing all these different bosses and everything else that's going on. So it helps me to remember that. So I want us to think about our course policies, their intentions, and their effectiveness. And here's the bottom line. Are we helping our students learn? Right? This is the lens that in all my teaching workshops, I always say just think about, it's not about teaching. It's about student learning. What is it that we are doing or contributing or not to student learning? Also, I want our policies to also increase our contentment with teaching. So that I don't have to deal with, it's like if I say, you must inform me every time you're going to be late, absent from class. I have this document here of endless emails that I used to get, and I still get it. Even though it says in my syllabus, do not inform me if you're going to miss class. I don't want to know. Because what am I going to do with that information? My niece, who, when she was in college, said 90% of them were lying. Right? So I want to also have policies that lead to contentment for me and teaching. The other thing I want to say by way of introduction is course policies have to be seen as a package, right? They have to make sense and be coherent, and they have to best reflect your teaching style, right? What would work for me doesn't necessarily would work for you. But I think it's important that we do have course policies, right? Not to think of them as a contract, which some faculty do. Maybe it's an agreement, right? Because this contract really isn't enforceable, right? So And in this book one of these books here by Designing a Motivational Syllabus by Harrington and Thomas, they argue that having a long list of do's and don'ts, right? If you get it in a negative tone as well, but a long list of do's and don'ts, what does that do? It creates an adversarial relationship between the student and the professor. So it's much better to frame it, your policies, in terms of this is going to help student learning and to help the student achieve the learning outcomes, okay? And I know, so 2 last things of introduction. Some of us have department-wide policies that we can't do anything about. You just got to deal with it, and maybe the way to do it is to put it on your syllabus, something in terms of tone that says that you understand that this isn't exactly how you would do it, without, you still got to be a team player, but say that this is what the department demands, and so this is what we're going to do. And I also know that policies are context dependent, right? What I will do with 15 students is not something I would do with 150 students, right? So I don't distinguish much between undergraduate and master's. I think it's the same kind of policy. You might think differently, and that's fine, and we can talk about it. So I want, as I speak now about my top 10 reflections, what I would ask you to do is, in your notes, think about how you would adopt or adapt for your own style of teaching and the kind of courses and context in which you're teaching. So number 1, it's really important to have policies. A study by Doolittle and Sadinsky in 2010 revealed that many faculty don't even include course policies on their syllabus. Only 50% had an attendance policy, 25% had a late work policy, or a missed work policy, or a disability policy. And only a third mentioned the honor code. So I think, as I said, it's important for students to know the policies so they know what the expectations are. What are the behaviors we expect from students? What are the rules? They have to be explicitly laid out. Number 2, policies should be written clearly so that they know, students know whether they're actually meeting the expectations and the behaviors or not. And maybe it's a rational decision for a student to not hand in a paper. I've had this, so I have for a late assignment, which I'll discuss later, but the student, it's a rational decision for them to take the penalty and work on a group project for another class. So a student said, I'm going to take the late penalty, and they're being responsible for their education, and I don't take it personally. Oh, they're not doing my work, right? This kind of attitude. So it allows the student to make rational decisions for themselves if we write our policies clearly. For example, rubrics for participation can really help the student know how to participate. And I have for you later my favorite rubric, which by Villanova University, that defines participation as 1st, listening, 2nd, preparation, 3rd, quality of contributions, 4, impact on seminar, and 5, frequency of participation, and it says at appropriate times. So how many of you have seen this? How many use it in your classes? Yeah. So Erica, what happens when
I specify, active engagement with a demonstration or asking questions, and it does feel like it clarifies what I'm looking for, and it doesn't devalue that student who's maybe super prepared, totally engaged, but a little bit shy as to raising his or her hand. I love it. I use
Yeah, it will. I have found, anyone else? So I have found that it, as a policy, it's my participation policy, if you will. It's what it does is it increases the what's it called? Sort of the evenness of participation. So there's not the same. If a student is always raising their hand, I'll pull them aside and say, remember that rubric that we're using for participation? You actually had a negative participation rate today because you were raising your hand too much, and it says at appropriate times. And so I then, if I have in that course policy, I can go back to that, and it doesn't, the students, you know, it's not personalized.
I'm also going to be using it to have students self-evaluate, so they are reminded of what I'm looking for in class engagement, is what I call it, class engagement, class participation.
I think that's also great. You might have said that to me last
I
year.
might have.
Yeah, I'm now going to use the term engagement instead of participation.
So you hand a copy of that out to all the students, or it's referenced in the syllabus?
Yes,
Both.
And on Blackboard as well.
and I'm gonna hand out to you that there is a link to it online.
What do you regard as the difference between participation and engagement?
Participation is raising your hand a bunch. Engagement is, I did the reading, thinking about it critically, got questions, I'm actively like ready to have a group discussion if need be, coming off of hours if that's part of what I want.
So I'll throw that back. Why would it be more useful to use the term engagement instead of participation? Justina?
Personally, I think that's a term that will make certain students, particularly introverted students like myself, feel a lot more comfortable. Because if you're an introverted student and you process information kind of behind the scenes, and having somebody acknowledge the fact that I can be engaged even if I'm not talking is really supportive.
Because listening, preparation, and quality of contributions and impact of seminar is what counts. Yes.
So it's it. Participation feels to me a little more mechanical, like that you're just kind of going through the motions. And I think using a term like engagement, which maybe this is sort of what you're saying about wiggle room, like it gets at. I think that some faculty are reluctant to use things like rubrics or getting too specific in their policies, especially around grading, because it can feel very contractual, or it can feel like students are going to sort of come back and say, well, you said in the rubric that this is worth 5 points, and you only gave me 4, or something like that. And so I think engagement's a little bit of a fuzzier term, but I think actually kind of in a good way.
Exactly, that's the thing, yes.
I have a little bit of problem with engagement. I like the concept of how do you evaluate it? You see a student looking interested, or you see a student looking not interested, and the student said, well, I was totally engaged with what was going on. So I think it's harder to measure what engagement is.
So I can see, so this is my workshop this afternoon on getting students to do the reading. We'll deal with a lot of this kind of thing, but I have assignments where they have to do the reading. So it's how you operationalize what it means to be engaged. So I say to them, I expect you to bring notes on the reading to class. And I give them reading questions in advance. So if they come and I'll just walk around before class and say, on that reading question, you know what Thompson was saying about the role of women. What did you think about that? What do you have in your notes? And then I know if they're prepared or not, right? So it can be a challenge.
To me, engagement means getting the student to co-teach with you, share what they have with the other students. And coming from the students is different from coming from the teacher. They have a different vision, a different language, a different way of communicating. That's how I experience that.
Okay, I think that can be one way of looking at it. We would still have to operationalize it, and that's where so being specific, I think, helps. So I have an attendance policy that says, and I'll hand this out to you at the end. Quote, students are expected to attend all classes. If you will miss a class, you must, so this is, so I apologize. So a professor that I know has an attendance policy that says, quote, students are expected to attend all classes. If you miss a class, you must contact the professor ahead of time. Okay, I see that as a policy for no accountability and endless emails. And as I said, it teaches them to be good liars. And so basically I say attendance is required, but there's nothing on the syllabus and you do not need to contact me if you're going to miss a class. And so there's wiggle room there, but there's also an expectation that's laid out. And if participation is 10% of your grade, but obviously you can't you can't contribute if you're not there. So I don't have time to go into it, but it did lead to a conundrum for me last year. I had a student who missed 9 out of 28 sessions. Student had depression. Couldn't sometimes get to class. I see that as an illness. I was like, yeah, what am I going to do? When he was there, he was heads and just way above everybody else in terms of deep reading, contributing. Gave him an 80 for participation because I was balancing out his total engagement and then his absence. 4.5 weeks. He, and he ended up with an A- in the course, which was a better grade than people who attended every day, every class. So I really bugged him. But it made sense when I started to look at, it's like, why should I penalize him because he has depression and can't get to class every day? So,
I have a question.
yes.
So with this policy that you have about not requiring them to report to you if they're going to miss a class, are you otherwise keeping a record then of who's
Yes,
missing
I am.
class? And
Yes, I am.
so then it does matter.
It
Could you
matters.
convey to them that it doesn't matter?
So this is the thing about being specific but flexible. That's where what I'm trying to get. It's a great question. So it matters in this. If I were to say, if you miss, some faculty say, if you miss more than 3 classes, it reduces your grade. So or unexcused absences. Well, then I have to get what's an unexcused absence, right? So that's why I'm specific but vague. If that makes sense.
Just to verify.
Well, I actually have it, yeah. So a faculty member last year had a student contesting their grade. His policies and everything were very specific. So it was all right there. And so it helped him in terms of contentment of teaching. So the problem is, so you have a specific policy, you miss 3 classes and your grade goes down. Well, then this student, had like a really good excuse, or you say unexcused. So then you put you in the in the seat of having to decide what's a legitimate excuse and not a legitimate excuse, or it leads you to not enforcing it, right? So, which is my third point, which is if you have a really specific policy, you have to enforce it. If you don't enforce it, what's the message we're sending? Oh, they're rules, but you don't have to follow them. Or they're rules, but you can negotiate with me, right? And so it leads to, I had a colleague go to policy, more than 3 unexcused absences in a course that meets once a week means you fail the course. And I could see that, but what about the special circumstances? And then the faculty member says, well, I don't always enforce it. It's like, okay, again, so what's the message that we're sending? And what about the student who isn't as assertive, that sort of, you might call the introvert, or one who's not going to negotiate with you, right? So we're just reinforcing power inequality.
So in circumstances where a student has a letter from the DS students or something that is
Right.
a long-term absence or flexible attendance policy, obviously those would be clear exceptions to something
Correct.
like the 3 absence rule.
Correct.
But it's not okay to sort of say, okay, I need something like that documentation.
So you could, all right. When my nephew's grandmother died, my mother, we're sitting around, waiting for the funeral, and my nephew gets an email from his professor saying, "Please send me the obituary." Do you see how that feels? I mean, I maybe you do require the obituary. Grandmothers do not. I know faculty who will say, "Oh, please tell me your parents' address. I'd like to send them a condolence. I'd like to, and then the student either comes clean, or you send a note to the parents, and that's one way around it, right? So also in terms of specificity, laptops. I know faculty who ban laptops. There are students who have accommodations where they are allowed to use the lab. So what you've just done is you've outed them as needing an accommodation, and that is not okay. I will just say that. That's just flatly not okay to out someone for their disability. So what I do is to say, I understand you might have a need for using a laptop in teaching, in learning in the classroom. So you need to fill out a contract with me. And you have to, I just said, I so-and-so will use my laptop only for the purpose of taking notes. If I violate this contract, I lose this right. And it turns me a little bit into a police person, but there are usually about 1 to 5 who do this. I also make it very clear, multitasking, if you are just too tempted by email or shopping for shoes, and I did actually go to a class and observe it, and I saw of 30-some students, 12 students on their laptops doing something other than what was going on in class, and one was actually shopping for shoes. I was so excited because it's a term the faculty always use, and I actually saw it. I said, how many pairs of shoes do you need? Okay, so my policy is, this is how I frame it, and I'm going to hand this out to you. Texting and the use of cell phones are not permitted in class as it is disruptive to the learning environment. In addition, studies show that taking notes by hand rather than laptop increases student learning. See this article from Scientific American for details. Thus, the use of laptops or tablets for taking notes during class is not allowed except by special arrangement with the professor. You will receive a participation grade of 0 on any day you violate these policies. It turns me into a little bit of a police, but the students will be on their phones, and I will just say to them, I saw you on your phone, and you have a 0 participation grade for doing it. To me, that's like a penalty, but it's not like they're gonna fail forever, right? And it sends the message. I've had students say to me, look, I'm gonna be on my phone today because my mother was in an accident and I'm waiting for a call. I'm like, great. You know, so it's that flexibility. I saw a hand.
Yeah, I have a question then about the participation or engagement end of that. Do you then find that you have to sort of evaluate every student every day? Like, oh, this one had their phone today, so they get a 0. Or this one raised their hand and asked very thoughtful questions, and they get a positive for participation.
So
do you have to do it every day for each student?
so I do it most days, not every day. But I also often do in-class writing assignments. And so that's data, that's real data as far as what your participation grade is. And with freshmen, with first-year students, I give them a ticket out the door that says, based on the rubric, they fill this out the first couple of classes. Based on the rubric, what participation grade would you give yourself today, based 1 to 100, and explain why. And then I also, on that ticket out the door, I'll say, what's one insight you had today, and what's one question you had today, from today, or other comments. It takes me a little while, but, and then I immediately look at it. So a student gave themselves a 95, I'm like, I cross it out, and it's like, and I'll say, you spoke too frequently, it wasn't based on the reading, you're getting an 80, right? And so I'm socializing them, I'm teaching them what participation means. And it only takes a few weeks. The students will want to keep doing it, but then I'm like, I don't have time to do this. So I then give them a participation grade, but it's amazing how much their participation improves. Just by getting that early feedback after a few classes.
I have a certain number of short items available online for students to read. So it's helpful for them to have their laptops. And I hate being a policeman. And I'm at this workshop partly because I'm trying to reconcile the conflict between green teaching, where you don't require them to have printout versions, and not wanting to turn myself into a policeman.
So here's what I'm now doing more often. Given the large number of readings on Blackboard and the fact that we were referring to readings during class session, my laptop policy is laptops up, laptops down. This means that your laptop should be closed unless we need to read from a text that is on Blackboard. And then I explain, studies show that taking notes by hand. So they still have to take notes in their notebooks and not on a laptop. But we'll just do laptops up, laptops down. And, well, I just have to, and it is tough. You
Say
become
that
a,
once
yes,
Each time.
yes.
Okay.
I'll say, you know, we want to go into the text here. And I don't, you know, again, this is also a policy about fairness. We have students who can't afford to buy the books, can't afford to print out every reading. And that's a shock to some of our faculty. But we definitely have students who can't afford to do that. And so it's not fair to ask them to print out the readings or bring the book. I always put the books on reserve, so they can always get them that way. So, and they can scan them that way too.
So similarly, I'm trying to wrap my head around some of these ideas. And one of the things I think I wrestle with is, at one level, college to me should be about, you're providing this material, you're paying for this material. If you want to come and shop for shoes, that's your call. I don't want to be policing whether or not you're shopping for shoes. If you don't want to do the reading, you don't do the reading, you fall behind, you don't understand this material, that's on you. So I think that's my maybe old school approach, and I'm trying to think, how do I justify, reconcile that with all of these, you know, when you said you really, you know, monitor, you know, participation for everybody every single day, you know, those kinds of things. I guess that's what I'm wrestling with a little bit.
So I'd like to hear other people's response. I totally respect that. It feels very parental. So the question is, can we reframe it in a way so it's about student learning as the teacher and not as reprimanding as the parent? Who would like to, I saw your hand first. Go ahead.
My thoughts are that it's not so much that, like, I agree that they're coming to college, it's on them to do the reading and learn. But my worry is that it's distracting to the person behind you.
Right.
And they might want to engage, and if you're shopping for shoes.
They might like the shoes. They're right.
And it's unfair to the person behind you. It's not just about them.
Yeah.
So some faculty say, if you're gonna use your laptop, you have to sit in the last row. So you're not distracting to others, so that you can opt out. I think that still sends a message of it's still a distraction. And, but I think that's, I had a student come up to me and say, you know, and it was literally like this, you think she's really taking notes, but she's doing Sudoku, and it's just not fair. I literally like, I was like, okay, I know that she's not, I can see when someone's not paying attention, but if God gave me this message, I need to call that student out in a way, and this is, I struggle with this. So I will now say to them, can you put your phone away, please? And I embarrass them in class. I don't like to do that, but I see that it's distracting. It's distracting to me. So I don't like to do it publicly. If you do it privately, the other students don't know that you've actually dealt with it. So that's a really big one on microaggressions. That's a whole other talk. So, other comments?
Building on what you're saying, I would provide like the other side of the same coin, which is I teach in a public university, so where people do not pay for them. So actually, one of the policies that we're struggling has not only to do with the laptops, but also with attendance that we try. I'm not sure how to do this and if it's appropriate or not. But the message we also send is like the whole society is paying you to come here, and that's the spot we are taking from someone else because we're not in spaces. So be responsible and give value to the place you're having and come to class. But at the same time, it's like, again,
I understand, so that's your context. So all we can do is, so what I'm trying to say is, it's student learning, it's a responsibility, how to hold an accountability without, right? And that's why I have a policy on attendance. It's like, it's up to you to decide not to show up or not. But that's a different context as a public university. So I saw another hand.
Yeah, I don't know. I have found, instead of trying to be policeman, I find a lot of it has to do with how adept you are at keeping the class's attention. So early on, when I started doing guest lecturing, I just had a natural style, not saying I'm better than anyone, but just moving around constantly. I find the more that you sift around the class, they don't really want to be on their laptop because they start to get, cringe a little bit. Oh, you can see what I'm doing or whatnot. If you do that in a subtle way, it just builds this sense of like they're on their toes. And if you're standing always back and everyone just sort of is in this pool by themselves, I think then there's more of that prone to just people being disengaged. But if there's movement, if you call on them kind of unexpectedly, not in an annoying way, but just, so what do you think about that, Andrea? Well, then that keeps them just fluid.
So that's part of the package, that your policies are not, if you just did that and were very lax about everything else, it wouldn't make sense. There has to be a way in which your policies are a package. I saw some other hands.
I just had a quick comment about this one, because I struggle with that too. And part of the way that I've been trained it in my head has to do with something that Betsy was saying earlier about how our policies relate to professionalizing students that are working well. So I think I often frame it that way, especially with attendance, that, what would happen if you didn't show up for your job? There would be a consequence, you'd like get you fired, so I try to say that it goes beyond just showing up and needing to, be present for this class. So that is.
I want to offer something else in thinking about policies related to attendance. I've been here 5 years. I've tried so many different things. I was very hardcore at first and struggled, if my threshold was going to be like 4 or 5 absences, and I'm a little looser the way you are, Betsy, but I do make it very clear that attendance is required. I teach a lot of introductory classes. Most of my students are just getting used to life at university. They don't know. Some of them have been told you don't have to come to class. You just have to do well on tests. And so I really try and reverse that, erroneous information by just emphasizing how important attendance is. And so I'm just very concerned about student wellness and mental health issues. For many of you who are new to the university, you'll see a lot of our students are struggling with this issue. So I actually like the emails. I do have students email me if they're going to be absent because it helps me connect with them, because that's what I teach. I teach the subject. It's important to me. I would much rather spend my time with that than getting like a daily participation grade from the students and spending that time. So I think going back to the very first thing you said, we just have to find what works right for us, what our values are, even as it relates to the courses that we teach. So I just wanted to throw that out. And that's sort of 5 years of processing and figuring it all out, where I've arrived at.
Well said, well said. So moving on, the point in what we're making here is, that my 4th point is about being transparent and explain the rationale. And you'll get much more buy-in, right? And so you're not the police person, but you're the teacher and explaining the rationale, all right? And so it's also being more positive than punitive, you'll get more buy-in. Number 5, flexibility can be desirable, right? And this is building on the last point, which is especially given our student body, a lot of our students are facing difficulties emotionally. They're also our students are now taking 5 classes and working 40 hours a week, or 30 hours a week, and also doing internships. They're really, really busy. Students battle, their mother is battling cancer and they're going home to New York almost every weekend. We might not know this. So one thing I try to do is meet with the students, find out. I don't want to know everything about them, but I ask, what is it that's going on in your life that might affect the way in which you engage in the classroom, so that I can help provide the environment which will be helpful for you for learning, right? So that a student says, I couldn't hand in the paper because I got a call from my cousin, on my cousin's phone that the Zetas, that's the drug cartels in Mexico, had kidnapped him as he tried to cross the border illegally. Okay, that's a true story. Yeah, that's happening to our students. And she's like, I was in the library trying to read the paper, but I couldn't. And it's like, that student didn't just offer that to me. That student did not come to me. I had to beg her, I asked her to come to me, I had opened, and I knew her from, this is the second class with me. So she was not gonna tell me that, she was dealing with all this herself. Whereas, I was like, no, forget the paper, is your cousin okay? And yes, he was. But she's like, oh, it's happened to me before. Okay, this is some of the stuff our students are dealing with now that we have no idea. So, I guess what I'm saying in that is, being flexible is important, and it's also challenging. How do we know that Susan's telling the truth and John is lying, right? And it puts us in the position of having to decide. And that's the trust but verify, right? With the example of my nephew. Flexibility can have unintended consequences. A new professor was, I hated deadlines and I want them to learn, and so I just told them at the last, I started to tell, yes, this one came to me, that one came to me. Can I have an extension? Well, he got a reputation of allowing extensions. And so it happened more frequently. And then he decided at the last minute, they all just wanted an extension. I gave them all an extension. Well, then the student stayed up all night, that was at the last minute. The student stayed up all night or skipped doing other assignments for his assignment was really pissed. So we can have unintended consequences from our policies. So it's about building a relationship of trust, but verifying. And I'm surprised how much students are honest with me, or at least I think they are. Number 6, if you have a policy, it's important to enforce it, right? And I think I've mentioned this, but I want to point out, I think it's important for the benefit of the student, the faculty member, and society at large, right? So if the policy isn't enforced, it's a mixed message to the student. Do you abide by this rule or not, right? That can create anxiety for our students. They don't know what to do, it's confusing. For the faculty member, if you enforce the policy, if you don't enforce the policy, then you're gonna have to deal more with the sort of negotiation that goes on. And you'll have to find, more time of being bad cop. And that's not a lot of fun. And as a political scientist, I think it's really important that we have rules in our society and that everybody follows them. And so we are teaching them to be good citizens, right? Reasonable rules, right? And not an unreasonable rule. All right, number 7, as I've said, if you have a policy, it has to be applied consistently to all of your students. Students talk. You accepted Susan's papers late, but not John's. Oh, maybe you have a racial bias. Maybe you have a gender bias. That's how they're going to interpret it. Maybe you do have an unconscious bias. So it's really important to apply consistently to all students. And so that is the struggle. So, which leads me to number 8, which is that flexibility is needed. So how do we get out of this conundrum of flexibility versus consistency? And I have 4 ideas, and I'm hoping you have more. Number 1, put into your syllabus, I'm going to drop the lowest grade on a quiz. I'm going to drop a low stakes assignment. You have to write 4 reading papers on the reading, but I'm only going to take the top 3 grades. It allows someone who's having a bad day or juggling, their midterm that week for them to still abide by it, but drop the lowest grade. Number 2, I have students, they're allowed to Skype into my class if they're out of town. As long as a fellow student handles the technology. It deals with technology, it deals with attendance, right? It happens quite often. And then the student will raise their hand from Colorado, where they went early for Thanksgiving to get the cheap fare. Again, fairness. It's about, the student can't afford the last minute plane ticket for Thanksgiving, right? So have students Skype into class. 3 is on the technology, laptops up, laptops down, as we've talked about. 4, I have a colleague who has a second chance policy, as he said, and I quote, "Students can revise flawed work as many times as they like until they're satisfied with the grade. Students love this option," he said, "and though it seems like a lot of additional work for me, in actuality, only a fraction of students take me up on it." This, end quote. "This is time consuming for the faculty, and most won't choose that option." That's me talking. I wouldn't do it. But the truth is, it's sort of, I don't know that it really gets at the issues that our students are, I don't know that, I think that, well, this says that the students who are gonna take that up are the ones who are pushing for the grade and not the learning. So what I do is I say, I will meet with you before the paper is due. Bring in your thesis statement, bring in your first paragraph, bring in your outline, and I go through it, and it's a learning opportunity. And I have extra office hours just before the paper is due, and I do it at night so that I can be more flexible. So then they have the.
I'm just gonna echo that. That's something that I wanted to be able to do that, to be able to offer opportunities for revision. And I realized some years ago that I think there's an official policy that an assignment that has been submitted can't be revised. I thought there was some policy along that line.
Nope.
Okay. So what I did was, somebody told me that at one point. So what I did was to start to say you could submit the assignment early, and I would critique it and let you revise it up until the deadline. But you're saying that there's no policy
There's no policy on
submitting
that.
it and letting them keep revising the assignment.
They can revise. Now, what I have found is when I did, and this actually, I had a situation that it went to the dean. The only time I've had a thing where it went to the dean, where the student contested the grade. They submitted the paper, I allowed revision, I gave them some feedback, then they did everything I told them, and they didn't get an A. And it went to the dean, and I had to say, this is not an A paper, and the dean backed me up, but it was not a pleasant May and June. So Lacey Wooten, who heads up college writing, has said, she's given up on that too. It's like, early revisions, you can bake it into the assignment. I will, send me your thesis statement and I'll evaluate or something. But I try to do it during office hours, and I do group office hours. So I'll bring it if they're all working on the same assignment. And so I'll have 7 or 8 students in my office, and so I make it a learning opportunity, and I make them talk, and I might take notes on it. But otherwise, I'm not an editor. They're looking for me to edit. And that's not, I don't think that's my job. And so I don't want to get into this back and forth of, well, I did what you said.
I once had a student who asked me to submit the paper early, and I said, yes, but I won't edit it, I won't grade it. What I will do is I will give you general comments that you can use as a guideline to improve the paper.
That's a good way to do it.
I have just a technical question for you. Betsy said earlier about dropping, like, a letter grade, what. Is there an easy way to do that on Blackboard without making it really complicated?
I use Excel. You can do it through Excel, where you can say that of these 4 assignments, drop the lowest one and then calculate it.
Or does anybody know if it can be done on the
I
Blackboard?
have done it on Blackboard with quizzes, so I'll typically give about 10 quizzes and say I'm gonna drop the lowest or the 2 lowest grades to do these quizzes. If you go to the Blackboard office, they're just so helpful, and they will help you. It's very simple. Yeah, it works.
Yeah, there's an easy icon. So basically, if you go into that particular grade, there's something beside it where you can basically not count it. So you can manually look and see what your lowest grade is, and you can just not count that grade.
So it requires the individual professor to select the lowest, the computer can't know the lowest?
Not on Blackboard, I don't think.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify.
I think if you go to Blackboard office, I think that it will, the computer can just pick the lowest one out and knock it out.
Okay, probably from a specific category, like you're saying, quizzes or.
The question I asked about resubmitting the assignment, can we get a sense of
How many people, great, thank you. How many people allow students to resubmit assignments? And what's your rationale?
I can share my rationale. I assign 5 to 6 writing assignments in a semester, and none is worth more than 15% of the grade. So they're not high stakes. 2, the feedback I give, though it's specific to the first assignment, I try and get feedback on how they frame their argument, strategies that they can apply to the second assignment. So the second assignment, you should be able to read the feedback from my first, even though the assignment is very different, but you should be able to take my feedback and apply it to the second. Because I don't want to reread.
But are they it's not they're resubmitting the same paper?
No, ma'am, there's no
No,
resubmission.
that's different. Derek is
They
talking,
Right, but the reason I don't do resubmissions is because I think I
Right.
give quality feedback that can be applied to
Right.
the next
That's what I
assignment
do
in
now.
lieu of a revision.
Right, that's what I do now.
That's what I do now.
I break the paper into multiple components that they're working on along the way. And so I give feedback along the way on those assignments, but I've never let a student resubmit an assignment. But it sounds like people do.
so who does that and why?
So, what I've done is, the main purpose is to give them opportunities to revise, to see how they can respond to the comments and try to incorporate those comments in a much better draft. And
So what makes you a teacher and not an editor? Do they do more than just,
I mean, I
Essentially,
think it's
isn't that giving
negative
them
comments.
an extension? Isn't that giving them an informal extension? They submit the bad paper in time, and then now they use the rest of the time to really do the good one.
so I
that
think,
is my experience.
there I think depends on how you grade the final. And in my syllabus, I say that I'll average the grades of the original submission, and so that they can't just get away with submitting nothing and then trying to submit a final paper.
So that might be one way to do it, so the first paper is what percent,
50%,
and then the second paper is 50%.
Right, so I average.
So you have it, that would be one way.
So I don't have this in my syllabus, it's sort of an unspoken, which I haven't figured out yet, but when a student bombs the paper fails, outright fails, because they didn't understand what it was calling for, they're in first year and they're just new to this. I can let them resubmit, they don't typically get the A or the B, but they're not failing. And I don't know how
Do you let everybody do it?
anyone who's failing, who it just,
But it's the people who get the B pluses
I know,
who want to redo.
I know, and this is where,
Because, and so in fairness,
I know,
you gotta let them fall. I know, and that opens a door that I don't wanna go through.
I hear you.
So what I've done is I dropped this with the freshmen. They have to do 4 writing assignments, first 4 classes. And I dropped the lowest grade, so they can bomb the first one.
I do
Or
have
second.
3 where you read an article and summarize it and ask questions. And the first one's a practice. And I don't beat them over the head, this is a practice, it's ungraded, but I have them all bring it in, and then I have them evaluate each other's. So they're getting practice in looking at the rubric, understanding it, and it doesn't count. Some of the students are like, what? I'm glad you called that out today, now you'll be better on the second one. So no one's, hopefully, no one's going to totally fail the second one, it's the ones that are graded.
So just to finish up, it's important to be fair in your penalty. I suggest that if missing class would go towards the participation grade and not the final grade.
Question on participation grade, how often do you keep students informed about their participation grade?
Not enough. I should do it, I often don't,
Okay, yeah,
and I should, but that's a question of, there's only so much we can do. I would say mid-semester, if anyone wants to know what their participation grade is, come see me. Or ideally, you would want to, with the ticket out the door with my freshmen, they get it every single, the first couple of classes. But ideally, you would want to do it mid-semester,
How much do you weigh participation overall?
10%. So the late assignment one is the one that I think is fair. I say, and I just handed this out to you, now you can look at your handout. No. Oh, that's, who needs? So does anyone on the table there have an extra they can share? I only make. Oh, no, I already, you have one. All right, so I can, So look at the one where it says deadlines. I do not consider deadlines to be optional or suggested time to hand an assignment. I reduce 3 points or 1/3 of a letter grade for each day it's late, but no more than 15 points out of 100 will be deducted because I want them to have the learning opportunity. If they're struggling in class, it's not it's not me, it's them. And I don't want them to fail all their classes within my class. So, and I also had to add assignments late if it's handed in after the beginning of a class on the due date, because they'd show up 45 minutes late for class. I learned that one in my first year teaching. Okay? So, number 10, be student-centered, right? I just asked you to reflect and choose policies that help student learning. And for example, that's the revision of papers. I stopped that because it wasn't helping with student learning, it was helping with student grade. And so the other thing to think about is how many of us have course policies based on how we look, you know, what they were when we went to some college, right? Or how we learn. Thank you for that laughter. I resemble that remark, right? So I think it's important. I've got a whole other thing on this new generation, and they're really different from who we are. Maybe some of you are closer to that generation, but they think and act really differently than we old folks, I will say. So we need to think about how they learn and develop, I think, some policies that are flexible and consistent and just contribute to student learning. All right, so that is way longer, but we had a lot of questions and answers. So who, in the 5 minutes we have left, is that right? Questions to each other, comments, clarifications, anything you'd like to add?
One last question. Do you give students the rubric in advance? So give a rubric for grading an assignment. You give them.
Absolutely. So if you could help, this is the rubric for participation. If you already have one, don't take one. And if
So I tend not to. I have very specific.
Why?
I base the rubric on the assignment instructions, and I have very specific assignment instructions. So I say, if you meet the assignment instructions, you'll meet the rubric.
why are you withholding the information about how they're going to be evaluated?
Well, there's a bit of a debate about the pros and cons of handing out rubric in advance, with this idea that it perhaps reduces creativity and, you know, stifles some thinking, and so, I mean, that's.
I respect that, and so, again, reflect on why you have your course policy. If you think it's gonna impede, this is, students ask me, can you show me an A, B, or C paper? And I'm like, paper writing is not paint by numbers. It's an art, not a science. And so, if you think it's gonna interfere with their learning, then don't do it.
Creativity part of the rubric.
There you go.
I mean, that's what I do.
Yeah.
We talked about sort of resubmitting sending back papers. I know in sample syllabus, colleague suggested using the writing center, so you could send it and say, well, this is these, I can't even grade. And then you go to the writing center for resubmit. Does anyone use that? Is that sort of like one person's bit of wisdom on how to deal with a resubmitted paper?
Does anyone use the writing center to bake that into their assignments?
I recommend they go there, but I don't allow them to go to the writing center and then read it. You know, but I think it's challenging. I tell them they have to make sure that they book well in advance.
Yeah.
The writing center gets busy.
Yeah.
So you have to warn them that they can't just, you know, ask the writing center 48 hours before something is due for help, because it's not gonna.
And my students say that I have the specific, the writing center is good for some things,
Yeah.
but not everything.
Yeah.
If I want them to use information in a certain way or to be able to develop an argument, they're not gonna know that. I've been teaching that all semester, and they don't know.
No. It's like you don't have do you know where we can get the link to the rubric or go to? I don't think they're that way.
Does anyone still need the participation rubric?
Oh, yeah.
Anyone else need the participation rubric? So if you could pass that back to them. Any more, yes?
So I had an issue this past semester for the first time. It's never happened before, where 3 students just didn't turn in an assignment. Like, it wasn't late, and in various ways. I asked them and they're like, oh, I'll get it in, they just never did. How comfortable are we with zeros, or what are we doing at 50? I mean, what, I told different
If they
professors.
don't hand it in, it's a zero.
And that's it.
And that's it.
Okay.
And the way to handle that is to say, put it on your syllabus. And
See, I will now, I never have done that, because that
Right.
never happened.
right, and frame it in the context of this, and if this assignment builds on this one, or whatever your reasoning is, if you're transparent, and, you know, we can't, there's some students who are going to fail. And I'm sorry, but we are not helping them. We should help our students, but not enable them. And in fairness to the other students who do them.
So in addendum to that, I had two, I guess two, the three didn't seem like they were doing it, two actually never did, and then one in like the last few days of class said, can I send it, turn this in, even though it had been like several weeks. Do you accept at that point, or?
It depends on the assignment. It depends on what your learning is, what your goal is. If they needed to have that done earlier to then do the next assignment, then no. So it depends on the assignment. There's a couple of hands, yes.
I have a question about Lateness. I posted the homework 2 weeks in advance, and the deadline is listed on the syllabus. And I just informed them, before the deadline. And, the day of deadline, I posted the answer online, so on the Blackboard. So this semester, it was my first time that I had a couple of students that they, it was a holiday, and then they just turned in the homework after the answers were posted. So I didn't accept it, but.
And they tried to negotiate with you.
Yeah, they tried to negotiate it.
So this is it. If you excuse me for getting personal for a minute, a young female, do you think that they would have done that to an older man? No way. No way. So that's about claiming your space as a professor and saying, and this is where, if you're explicit in your instructions in the homework assignments, then you could say, and you can say no late assignments are accepted once the answer is posted. And this is where your rules start to get long, and I don't encourage. If you know in advance there's a holiday or something, let me know. Right? You can say, hopefully, I look at this holidays and I make sure that there's no assignments due those days. That's another thing is when you make assignments, try to make them so that they're.
It wasn't due on the holiday.
Then they have to plan in advance.
The session you have,
Yeah.
the holiday was just
No.
3 days after that.
The answer is no. So this is the other thing, which is, it's very important, especially I've heard a lot of people who are new faculty members. We need to claim our space. And assuming the course policies are fair, and the way you engage in the classroom is fair, and if you make a policy that's not fair and then you realize that, own it. And say, you know what, I realized that wasn't fair, or that assignment was too hard. And, I could assign it, I was like, that assignment just really didn't work. The lowest grade I gave on it is a B, let's just move on. And it became a joke in the class from then on. So I'm not gonna go into the detail, but it was hilarious and it built solidarity because I claimed a mistake and we all laughed about it. So I need to wrap up. I want to thank you for listening as much as you did. I know I did a lot of talking. I hope that I've given you, the point was for you to maybe take a few minutes now and just pause and think, what does this mean for what you're going to do for your course policy? So I wish you all a happy semester.